Welcome to Believing the Real, a series of talks on the theology of the real. In this episode, the third in the series, we will discuss the rise of the social among mammals and then the theology of the spirit among primates. Hello, another episode of Believing the Real. Talks discussing evolutionary progress, but in fact discussing a theology of the real that views reality itself as the manifestation, as a revelation, a creative revelation of the divine. Our model was to view reality as progressing towards perfection. Let me give you a description of this model. Here it is. We have progress and perfection. The ideal, that's our conjectures about reality, and the real, that's the refutations. And through the refutations, through the real, we are progressing, reality is progressing to some infinite perfection that is posited as the very core of reality. And these theories of talks discuss the implications of this meta theory, if you will, or I call it the Evotrust overlay, because it overlays all interpretations of reality and provides a perspective through which we can view both science and religion, both our own lives, modernity, post-modernity, pre-modernity, a complete vision of history that provides us with perspective of how we can develop our own lives, make our own lives better. So my last talk was devoted to evolutionary progress, and I showed you how evolution develops not through the survival of the fittest, or let's say the survival of the fittest is just one aspect of what we can see in evolution. And of course, we have to redefine what fitness means. What does it mean, survival of the fittest, when we see the trend of evolution? So fitness is defined differentially according to what is happening at each state of evolution. For example, we began speaking first about the appearance of life at the level of prokaryotes, and then eukaryotes, single cellular organism that developed at the beginning of life on Earth. Most of the time that there is life on Earth, it's the life of these single cells. It's like 1,400 million years of existence before multicellular organisms appeared, i.e. plants, animals, everything we know that is multicellular. Most of life on Earth began just 600 million years ago out of an evolutionary time scale of 14.2 billion years for all of reality. So in fact, we are at the very last, or if we look back, we are at a very late place in evolution. Of course, this is the place. There is no scale stretching beyond. We can only look back because this future is shrouded in mist. But I think when we look back, we can find all kinds of extrapolations, and this will be, in fact, the main theory, the main ideal that we will try to extract the main conjecture that we will try to extract from our extrapolation of reality is to see what went before and to try to think how we can extrapolate this for the future and what implications this may have for our own reality. So when we looked at various stages of life, we saw that different things developed, so that fitness would have a different definition in each part of reality, in each stage of the development of the real. So this outmoded view, or let's say this view of fitness, the Spencerian point of view, with all its connotations of might makes right, and survival, nature red in tooth and claw, must be reformulated, for it is now completely outmoded when we really look into what's happening within evolution. We will see it's not survival of the fittest, more likely it's survival of the sweetest, but we'll get to that. In this talk, we will focus on human evolution, and we will see how in human evolution, fitness is not might makes right, but something completely other. In any case, even if we look at the stages of evolution before humanity appeared on the scene, we see that different stages of evolution have different types of fitness, of what makes the organism appropriate or suitable for its tasks, which is, it's not really, it's all merged into one, because the tasks of each individual creature are its life, are its expression, are its manifestation, and ultimately the manifestation of divine progress, divine progression. And we saw that there is a trend that comes from first predation, eating others, then procreation, finding others as mates, and ultimately parenting, directing attention to others from a point of view of care and sustainment and nurturing and protection. So we see that the attitude towards the other and the whole formation of self and other, beginning from the very first single cellular organism that had to maintain a difference between itself and the external environment. So there is the self and the other from the outset. And then this self began looking for others to devour. So the relationship between self and other is, as I said, a fisherman likes fish or loves fish. So it's like devouring the other. And then we find the rise of sexuality, the rise of sexual procreation, and this is a very important stage in the development of evolution. And then the other is one's mate. And again, there is different kind of fitnesses for that stage. And then the next stage from which we begin this talk is that of the appearance of parenting. We see that it sort of flickers in and out. It develops in various ways, in different niches within evolution. More or less, ultimately within reptilia, about 25% of reptiles exhibit some form of parental care, and our turtle here is a case in point, as turtles bury their young in warm sand so they may be protected. So you see the vestiges of parental care, and then this erupts into amazing development in birds, fowl of all sorts, and mammals, which have two distinctly different strategies of parenting, of sustaining the young, of caring for the young. And these strategies develop a new vision of fitness because it is the caring parent, the one capable of putting aside its own desires, urges, need to sustain itself in favor of sustaining the young, of giving the other, that becomes greater fitness. So the red in tooth and nail and so on, claw, may be relegated to the very essential stages of predation that, of course, accompany us even to this day. All levels of evolution, as I said before, are incorporated within the next levels. But this is a very, very primitive or preliminary, primary stage of evolution, just like molecular structure is. All of evolution is the evolution of molecular structure. But it's a different level, something new appears, even though all the old structures are there. So we continue to eat others, whether animal bodies or plant bodies. Plants are also multicellular organisms. Although, and we see that this is still part of our own situation. And also, of course, sexuality, even though it began like a few 100 million years ago, it's still very strong with us. And of course, parenting is obviously still with us. And it's all one stage above the other, and each stage incorporating the previous stages. So when we get to parenting, indeed, we have this appearance of care in the world. And again, all the dichotomies between instinct and thought and soul and soulless and soulful, between animal and man, all these distinctions break down when we look at the evolutionary point of view, and when we realize that what we see here is a progression of increasing gentleness, increasing sublimity. The divine begins to appear with this relation to the other that we find within evolution itself. So when we look at it, then we see that it is becoming more and more directed to the other in a different way, in a more now we know from parenting that this is a more gentle way, a more self-sacrificing, a more caring for others. And what of the self? And what of the self? Okay, the self is not lost. We will see how this is the very inside of the push of human evolution is in fact part of the general thrust, where individuals still maintain all their functions. We saw it in the cellular and the multicellular level, that each cell is in fact a single-celled organism acting in tandem, in cooperation with other single-celled organisms to create the creature or the animal or the person, and they all work together in a differentiated way to create the larger organism. And this larger organism now takes care, when parenting appears, takes care of the next generation, of another organism that has all the elements of itself, but it's young, it's small, and needs care and fostering until it grows into its adult form, which will then again foster the young. You will notice that this image is not contradictory to the selfish gene of the idea that the genes make us, but it does contradict the idea of randomality, because if everything was random, then why would genes spend so much effort in creating something so not egoistic, not egotistic, this turn to others, this care of others? And many ideas have been proposed by evolutionists to explain it, especially when we look at the insect colonies, where we see all those workers, the employee bees, working to sustain the next generation without even procreating. So this is like the great mystery, and they make all kinds of calculations of how close a kin you are. But we will see that this is one stage. This kin relationships or kin selection is one stage of this general picture of how the world develops, and especially when we reach our generation and humans, where we are now. Where are we at now? In any case, let's look for a moment at human beings in this juncture that we left off in the last talk about parenting. So if the birds developed a strategy of laying eggs outside the body of the mother, and these eggs host the chicks for some time, and then when the chick comes out, it's still very, very, very weak, very undeveloped, and needs a lot of work by the parents and a lot of protection by the parents to grow into its full-grown shape or form. The mammals, and we have the duckable platypus to see this, how this diverged, how evolution tried both strategies at one at the same time, and ultimately diverged into two separate lines. We have all the marsupials, in fact, have this, the pocket, which is almost a womb, and the joey that is born and then held in the pocket. So it's like birth, but outside, and the duckable platypus that has an egg, and then it suckles. So we see that there was it's like a flickering of evolution, trying this, trying that, but the progress is there. The push inside is there. All these attempts are there. And ultimately, there's a lot of freedom of experimentation. This randomality within reality allows forms to develop, and they are freed to follow their destiny, as it were. And we see all kinds of forms developing. Some of them become extinct, but most of them do not become extinct, but transformed. As I said before, dinosaurs may be thought of as extinct, but actually, if you're going to Wikipedia, you'll see that the birds are in fact considered within the clade of dinosaurs. So it's like, where are the dinosaurs? They've become birds. There's transformations. But indeed, some forms have become extinct. The Tyrannosaurus rex is not with us any longer, but though we find his ancient bones in the ground. So this was one strategy. The other strategy of parenting is the mammalian strategy, as we know, and this became a double strategy of keeping the offspring within the mother's womb until it is completely or almost completely ready to exist independently. There's no rushing about like the birds feeding the chick. The foal or the calf, once it comes out, it immediately stands on its own 2 feet, and it can suckle from the mother, so it's independent. But there's an accompanying strategy here, which became the differentiation within mammalian societies of males and females in a very strong way, with the males protecting the females and the females protecting the young. It's like became like a layer upon layer. And this is the beginning of society. And this is, we see how it rises out of evolution, how social development rises out of evolution as an increasing sophistication of this search, as it were, for greater, we don't know what yet. We can only see what happened. So this search for parenting led to better parenting, as it were, led to the formation of societies. And we see the first rudiments of social differentiation, and this becomes more and more prominent among mammals, leading ultimately to the apes, the great apes, all the primates. And the primates are have very advanced social relationships. There's already a society, and the individual now has to find its place within a whole hierarchy. It's not just mother and child, and not just the bird and its chick. It's now a whole society that has to function together, and its functioning together gives rise to different kind of fitnesses, different kind of adaptations. In society, it is not just might makes right, because in a society there can be coalitions, one against the other. Three individuals can defeat one. There's a hierarchy, and all this emerges from a trend that we can look at. It's an arrow, it's a directionality of progress that it becomes very clear when we look back. So let's look a little bit at the human. So as we said, the human parenting style, first on the biological level, it combines the solution of the mammals and the solution of the birds. It is obvious that humanity is a new rung in evolution. It is something new appearing on the world stage. And this new instigates many, many changes in everything that went before. Everything continues to exist, but different. Beginning from predation, something becomes very different here. It's not just one individual predator against the other, but it becomes a social enterprise. And we know from hunter-gatherers that it's mostly the women who collect tubers and vegetation and so on, most of the nutrition, and the men, they have the hunt, and they go and hunt and bring meat about once a month, and they're also in charge of other things, cultural developments. We'll get into that, into the whole issue of gender. Will be another talk, maybe even a series of talks, but that's not the issue at the moment. The issue at the moment is the social differentiation that gives rise to new ways of doing the old stuff, which is the very point of evolution. We have, like progress, a new way of doing an old thing, and that gives rise to a completely different formation, a completely different thing. So predation changes because now individuals can hunt together. We see this in primates already. Procreation becomes also entrenched within social structure. We have the alpha male who procreates with all the females. Alpha males fight between themselves, or all males fight between themselves. There is a tendency for the strongest, and here we have all the human males who studied evolution were very happy. This is something very nice. Elaine Morgan, who wrote about the aquatic ape, very interesting series of books. I'll be talking about her in future, but she says you can see this a bespectacled accountant reading about the naked ape, the wild and strong naked ape, who the alpha male and so on, and this is. She sort of ridicules it because she says, look, this is not how this is not what's really happening. And indeed, she's right, because this is not what's really happening. What happens is that from the evolutionary point of view, within mammalia, there is indeed dimorphism between the male and the female. The males become much bigger and stronger, and mainly because they fight each other. And this ultimate alpha male will impregnate all the females, or most of them, and therefore the next generation will be have the same tendencies of strengths and so on. This is classic Darwinism. But when we get to primates, we see a different picture. And Peter Deval, I think he's called, I look him, he wrote many books about chimpanzees and amazing stuff. And he wrote Chimpanzee Politics, a wonderful book. And he shows how in chimpanzee societies, even this alpha male thing breaks down. There are alpha chimpanzees, but they have all kinds of usurpers. And sometimes these usurpers can also have an impact on the gene pool because young chimps, male and female, tend to enjoy each other's company and procreate surreptitiously, as it were. And in fact, we see that both procreation and predation already in primate societies become subject to the social. And when we get to the level, the main innovation of recent evolution, parenting, we see that it takes another dimension within, let's say, chimpanzee societies, where the females and the males all share some of the care of the young, or at least, if not share, at least there is a social hierarchy where the young is the core. The young are the core, the females surrounding them, and the males associated with the females. In fact, it is more of a matriarchy, it turns out, in chimpanzee societies. But this will become this again. This is to do with gender, and I'll get to it. But just touching on it, the male in mammalia, the male is usually more free to and more expendable to do things in the periphery, as it were. And this gave rise to the predominance of males in the development of human civilization because they had more free time. They were less bound by the biological to certain roles. They could break free of the role. They needed more dogma to keep them in place. So this is also a development, and we will see how modernity breaks this, because the biology itself is now breaking apart. And because of this, it makes there's room for a new vista to that we are just beginning to see, that is spreading out before us, where gender no longer plays a role or plays a minor role, just as the older levels, gender is not gone. Biology has not left us. There are differences with males and females, but these differences are not, as we say, biology is not destiny. Human beings are at a new level today that transcends everything that we find in primate societies. But we are currently talking about primate societies and what we can learn from the evolution of animalia, even before we get to human beings, or before we get to our current state of civilization, which is, of course, the main point of interest here. So we see that as we look back on evolution, on evolutionary progress, we see that there is a trend of increasing differentiation, of increasing, how shall we say it, benevolent attitude towards others. They become not just objects of predation, but slowly procreation, and then parenting, and then social structure with its increasing differentiation. But before we continue, probably in the next talk, to human society per se, and its development, the evolution of human society, the evolution of the human biological evolution, and human cultural evolution, and ultimately civilization, and ultimately, on top of civilization, modernity, which, as we will see, more or less the new era, our era, which begins after the Second World War, with the great transformations after that. Most of the modern world was created, the greatest innovations after the World War, but that's another thing that we will discuss much later on. But before we look at all that, we have to go back and look at the theology of all this. Let me place a nice theological background here. Here we are. So, believing the real, between the ideal and the real, progress and perfection. So, there's an ideal, a theory of reality and reality. What we spoke about in evolution now is the aspect of reality revealed through what we know of evolution. This is the form of the real, this evolution. That's the way it works. But an issue here arises of a conflict, if you will, a refutation, of one of the greatest ideals of the great religions, something that transcends or crosses most of the boundaries of religions, both Hindic, Buddhist, monotheistic, and even most religions that are neither, like cannibal metaphysics. They also have this. So what is this? It is the distinction, the separation of the world and its spirit. The world as manifested to us, the real as it were, and our idea of what lies behind the manifestations. And this is, of course, the main argument here of the theology. Let me put on a theological background. Here we are, theology of the real. So, one thing that all religions have in common is their treatment of the ego, the spirit, the mind of human beings as distinct from their physical body, from the physical bodies they wear in reality, in the real. So if we have in Hindic religions, we have the idea of reincarnation. What reincarnates? This soul, this spirit moves from one generation to another, from one form to another. The Hindic systems are closed systems. Your spirit or the spirit can move from, say, a level of animals. If you've been behaving badly, your karma will push you down the ladder. And if you behave very well, you will go up. You will be born either as a human or even as a demigod or even as a god. But it's a closed system where the soul jumps from one generation to the next, suffering its appearance within the real. In the monotheistic religions, we have the creation, the story of creation. God made the world, made the real, and made man in his image, and he put his spirit into man. Man incorporates the divine spirit, and this animates him. This has led to very strong distinction, especially in the West, between the body or the real and the machine, which is perceived as the machine, and science has been relegated to inquiring about the machine, the mechanics of reality, the mechanics of the body, while religion has been relegated to the fostering of the soul it's the way it should be treated, the way it should work, and of course, what will happen to it in the afterlife. If you behave well, you may get a better place in the next world, according to one aspect or one method. Another method, more like a Protestant, is it doesn't really matter what you're doing. Ultimately, your soul will be either saved or damned in the next world. And of course, it does matter what you do. Everything goes back to reality, and we'll go into greater depth about the actual workings of these theologies at some later date. But at this point, a conflict is set up here with our evolutionary point of view. Because if our idea is either that the soul jumps from one solid state to another, like in the Hindic religions, or that the soul has been imbued within matter by divine intervention, then this sets up a conflict with evolution, with the progress within the animal world, and to the point of the appearance of man. And it creates a very strong distinction between man and the evolution of other creatures, of the whole world. It sets man apart from creation, actually rips him out of creation and puts him on some pedestal outside the unity that we saw in everything. So, and this also led to some very weird ideas about animals as machines. Malebranche, not Pascal, the other one, Descartes, they talked about the human body and the animals as having no souls, because only humans have souls and animals as machines. And they did some very nasty experimentation with animals, disregarding animal suffering as instinct and so on. And this issue is still under contention in our civilization. But the idea is that it's like an outside dogma about the soul that most religions have. And now, if we look from an evolutionary point of view, we see that there is a development soul-wise, as it were. As I kept emphasizing, we have increasing gentleness. So what is it in the animal that is capable of predation and then procreation and then parenting? Does a bird feeding its young have no soul? Okay, so what is this soul? So how can we describe this caring behavior as instinctual? Why is this dichotomy created? And especially if you look at it, you will see that soul-wise, or let's put the word soul, which is so laden with past dogma aside, let's talk about consciousness. Let's talk about awareness. Let's talk about self-awareness. So when we look at the animal world, we see also that there is that the same evolutionary scale that we find in morphology, in the fossil remains, and that we find in genetics, in our genetic knowledge of how the animal world and us are all built, all constructed. We see also that there is a scale, it's the same ladder here, that connects various animal forms. So let's just as a parable, or just in order to make it more tangibly graspable, let's think of pets. If you've kept pets, let's say you had a hamster, a rabbit, a cat, a dog, and maybe someone had a monkey. So now compare your pets, your various pets, also maybe a parrot. Let's not put the fowls outside. One of those jackals they're called, or a cockatoo, one of the advanced parrots, and put all these birds, try to organize them on a scale soul-wise. or awareness-wise, spirit-wise? Are they of the same spirit? Can we compare a bunny to a cat? Can we compare a cat to a dog? Can we compare a dog to a monkey? If you would arrange them, for me, it's very easy to arrange them. I would put the hamster at the bottom. No, I would put the bunny at the bottom. Sorry, bunnies. Then I would give hamsters or even gerbils. They could be more intelligent because they're very active and they look around their environment and they are really proactive. At least the rats or gerbils that I raised were so. The bunnies tended to just sit and wait for their lunch. I don't want to denigrate bunnies. Bunnies are a great favorite of mine. Even in my logo, I use a bunny because bunnies can be brought to action. We had some bunnies that we raised more or less in a cat-like environment, and we let them out, and they would jump from one place to the next, and but they cannot be actually they cannot have advanced training, just more or less like Pavlovian training. So a bunny is, let's face it, and I really, really hope I'm not insulting any bunnies, they're pretty dumb. And gerbils are much more inquisitive and energetic and proactive. They don't just sit there waiting for your lettuce. But let's go another rung. Let's go to cats. What about cats? Oh, cats are very advanced creatures soul-wise. Anyone who had a cat, they have a mind of their own. Each one has his own personality. Some like you, some don't. Some like to be caressed. Some just are standoffish. Some are, you can never get them to do what you want. Some come to cuddle all the time. They purr, and then they're off and they're back and they go. And you can see that they have awareness, mind of their own. If we go another rung, to dogs, already social animals, because the animals before, yeah, okay, bunnies and rats are also social animals in a way, to some extent. So, but dogs, okay, that they have a hierarchy, and as dogs are really communicative, you know, that anyone who had a dog cannot, in good conscience, say they have no soul, because dogs are so soulful. They look at you. They care for you, they pine for you. They are so close to humans in many of their interactions. You can see the awareness, you can see the creature there. So now we are saying sentient or not sentient. But also these distinctions, because sentience is the awareness of one's awareness. This is really something that we find is mainly in human beings, but we will see in a moment it is found in primates. Are dogs sentient? Are dogs aware of their own awareness? I doubt it. But the awareness of the dogs, this non-sentience, does not mean that they are not full of spirit, full of consciousness, full of awareness. In many ways, we can see that dogs are non-sentient in the way that we are non-sentient in certain aspects of our consciousness. Those moments of, say, dreaming or I don't know, maybe drug-induced, or when you're half dozing, that you lose your awareness of awareness. You're saying but you are still aware. You are still conscious, but it's not. Maybe as children we were more prone to that. Maybe a child, before it becomes self-aware, self-conscious, as we say, does have a consciousness. It learns, it speaks, it talks, it jumps. The English language has it. It calls its child an it. Other languages don't give a child this place of being an it. But when the child is an it, then can it be compared in consciousness to a dog? Or better still, let's go up the rungs and look at primates. We know that chimpanzees and gorillas have been taught, I think orangutans too, have been taught even human language. And they certainly behave in ways that remind us of a very, very young children, although it's very different. It's not, you really can't compare, because human beings are really another leap of evolution. But this leap is not the grand barrier between soul and matter. It is not the grand barrier that is assumed by most religious dogma, that will have an empty husk into which the soul is injected. Because although indeed there is this, because animals too can die. And what happens to the life of the animal when it dies? What happens to its spirit when it goes away? So indeed, we can see that animals too have an animate and inanimate, okay? Inanimate. Indeed, the word inanimate goes to describe without soul, inanimate. So what is inanimate? Just rocks and stones. And they are also very animated, we know, on a quantum level. But at least what we talk about anima, we talk about the soul. This is the word for soul, anima. So animals have a soul. And that soul is developing. And we see when we get to primates that already we have many distinctions that distinguish humanity in the primate world. And for this, chimpanzee politics, I believe this, and he has other books, Deval, amazing books about animals and the way they socialize. And they are capable indeed of something that is very, very akin to self-awareness. You can see that they are self-aware, especially when they are trying to trick other animals, when they are shamming, when they are playing all kinds of tricks. And this can be found both in primates and also in some very advanced birds like cockatoos, maybe in octopi, I don't know. But the intelligence obviously increases as we go up the evolutionary ladder, and creatures become more soulful. So if we see that this develops, and we see that it is not a quantum leap between humanity and the primates, it is rather a quantum leap achieved through maintaining or using as a fulcrum maybe, or using as a springboard, the previous level of evolution. In fact, it's what we saw throughout, because as we saw single cellular organisms become organized in multicellular organisms, which then organize themselves in groups. And these groups become larger and more differentiated. So if you will, the leap from mammalhood or the mammalian kingdom into the human kingdom is that leap of further differentiation, of taking the next step in social development. So in fact, we see a transition, if you will, from biological evolution to cultural evolution or social evolution. And indeed, humans have indubitably evolved in a social environment. So, because when we look at primates, we see the very basis for what later became the advanced and complex societies that we know as human societies. But this is not a quantum leap in the sense that there was first there was flesh and then the soul was put into it. We see a development of the soul. We see a development of the spirit. And indeed, this is very easy to perceive in humans as we grow, because when we are born, we already are alive and have all the potential. But as we become more human, as we develop, we progress into our humanity, we become more soulful, more self-aware. We can expand our self-awareness. We can become more aware. There are now consciousness-raising groups. We can raise our consciousness. It truly depends on learning, on social learning, on our association with the learning of others. More of that, a lot more of that, when we really delve deeper into human civilization. But the important thing is here that we have a contradiction here. We have a conflict between our dogma, our theology, our perception of the real through the eyes of our ideals, i.e. humans, they have a soul, they are different from all other creatures, and what we see about how the real actually develops and how indeed the spirit arises throughout the cosmos, throughout the world, and we are part of the animal kingdom. We are one with it, and we are like the representatives, if you will, the priests of the animal kingdom. We are those most developed in our awareness, consciousness, self-awareness, and so on. Now, Evotrust explains this within the context of the progress and perfection. So let me switch here. Here we are. Progress and perfection. So how does Evotrust explain this? It is not that the soul of human beings is not divine. It is divine, indeed. It is divine in the same way as the spirit of the world is divine. It arises from within what we know as the material world, which from the outset is not ruptured from spirit. It is not divine and material, distinct from each other. But as we said, everything material is in fact the divine becoming a place that can grow and progress. It is the ancient Kabbalistic vision of the perfection, the ultimate divine, making a place within itself for the ultimate situation in which progress can occur, in which the spirit can arise from a lower place, from a less progressed, younger, less developed state to a greater or higher state. So once we realize this, then we understand that all the very trend, the very essence of the world is this manifestation of spirit in increased, very gradual awareness. The cosmos is becoming aware. The real incorporates the ideal, because the real is the ideal made manifest. But this manifestation is not a one-time thing. It is not static. It is not either or, but gradual, developing, progressing, slowly. Awareness comes into the world, and we see this as increasing the way that perfection comes into the world, but it does not come. It grows from within. It glows from within. So in fact, our vision of reality, the Evotrust vision of reality, sees both the evolution of spirit within the real, within actual concrete reality, and the wonder of its self-awareness when we reach this amazing place that we are now, where as human beings we are faced with making amazing decisions, both about our own fate and the fate of the animal kingdom, because everything depends now on humanity. And this dependence on humanity hinges on our ability to find this Middle ground? No, middle ground is a bad word. This synthesis, if you wish, this understanding, okay, let's have this new theory or the deeper understanding, this more comprehensive theoretical understanding of our standing vis-a-vis both the real and the ideal, where we are in the world of this conjecture, the world of conjectures, which makes up the fabric of our civilization, all this belief, and we will get into it in future, and our meeting with the real that causes change. That is the very core of evolution. And we are obviously at an evolutionary crossroads in this day and age, where all the previous forms are disintegrating, including the very biological, genetic, gender, everything that we knew about the way we behaved as humans, and which was very close, the way we came up from primatehood, as it were, is now subject to both contention and change, transformation, and it is here that this vision of Evotrust can be used to overlay what is happening to us and to see that there is a divine trend within evolution, and this divine trend is within us as well, calling on us to become more perfect, to become better persons, better human beings, better friends, better parents, better everything, including better artists, better virtuosos, better athletes. In short, it allows us to merge or heal this rupture that occurred in our previous visions of reality, and once more see that we can be both open to the real and its refutations, and open to the ideal within the real when we see the way that the real progresses. And yes, that completes our introduction, in fact, to believing the real, the way evolution behaves. And the next talks, we will start speaking about human civilization and the shift, in fact, within human civilization, what we know of history and what we are, where we are now, where we are in this day and age, the Google age, the age of, the age of virtual reality. So, which is really real. So actually, it's like, it's not virtual reality. It's virtual reality within the real. It is part of the real now. So